Hello and welcome. I think I'm not gonna waste too much time. I'm gonna just kind of hop into the Dark Souls because that's what today's episode is about. This is the precursor information for the lore that we should have picked up by this point, given that we are the chosen undead. And by our actions, we recognize that the chosen undead is very likely a disciple of the goddess Velka, and as such, we have chosen to use an occult weapon as we slay the lords, because occult weapons are the only weapons fit to defeat a lord. Priscilla, when I got to her, I questioned who her mother might be, and then I realized it's Velka. The painted world of Ariamis contains a lot of treasures of the occult, such as like the occult ember, which was hid away by the church. Now, that alongside some pyromancies that should not exist there, that's gonna be toxic mist and like flame mist, or flame spray and toxic spray, poison spray, whatever they call it in this one. A lot of heretical goods in the painted world of Ariamis. Now, when we think of what it means to be heretical, that which functions without the gods, well, we have a sorcerer we can actually look at to kind of see how that works in the world of Dark Souls. And I'm talking, of course, of Big Hat Logan, who, I mean, he went with the Night King Rendell and Black Iron Tarkus to conquer Sen's fortress, and then was captured by serpent people, which that's kind of embarrassing. You know, Night King Rendell is from the Kingdom of Baldur, and that Baranike is very likely a descendant kingdom of them because they have steel. But what I thought is maybe they're a descendant kingdom because you have the progression of metal. But when you look at it, the iron golem guards the top of Sen's fortress, powered by a dragon bone. The dragon bone inside the iron golem is a construct of Seath the Scaleless, who is known to experiment with that type of stuff. And with this, what we can determine is we shouldn't be looking at the Iron Golem and the relation to the Baranike Knights and the, like, Night King Rendell's disappearance, but we know Undead Prince Ricard. So Baldur fell after an outbreak of undead occurred, and then Prince Ricard is in Sen's fortress at the area where you find Ricard, or Sen's fortress, you find the Ring of Steel Protection, which was an item of the Night King Rendell. Night King Rendell is a person who's depicted on the silver coin. The reason that that's important is Petrus gives you a copper coin, and I thought to myself, where else in the game does this occur? Because it has a picture of someone, Old Man McCloyf, the god of medicine and drink, and I thought to myself, this doesn't seem like a god that's in the pantheon to only ever be mentioned in the realm of man. But then I thought about how in Vinheim there's a dragon school that praises 3 dragons. Now, I don't believe Seath would be aware that there are 3 dragons, but the father of moonlight sorceries, or, you know, the creator of the moonlight greatsword when you cut his tail off, and then Gwyndolin, who was raised as a woman. Do you think Seath the Scaleless, who betrayed his own, who is betrothed something by Gwyn to get him the title of Duke at the, like, turn of the Age of Ancients to the Age of Fire? He's bequeathed something, and then all of a sudden, Gwyn wears white robes of a maiden and is raised as a woman, and Seath has an obsession with the women of... I'm starting to think Gwyn didn't raise Gwyndolin. And the reason I say that is because Gwyndolin has the moonlight robes, which I think that's a dead giveaway. He's guarding the tomb of Gwyn. What's he keeping secret? I understand keeping the illusion over, like, Anor Londo of Gwenevere, but then the Flame God Flan. That's another name that only appears once in the Ring of the Sun Princess, which is very strange because it's like another goddess, Fina, who appears only in Lautrec the Embraced's armor, the armor of favor. But when you see what happens with the Knight Lautrec comments on Petrus, and then upon seeing Petrus abandon the maiden Rhea, he kills Anastasia of Astora, the Ash Maiden. We can get the dingy set in the black eye orb, but that's what made me really start thinking. Because there's the black eye orb that you get from Anastasia, and you use that to invade the world of the guilty, the knight Lautrec, because Lautrec has committed a sin against the gods, which is what the Black Eye keeps watch on. Because the Black Eye is an extension of Velka, who, the reason I'm saying this is because Oswald of Carim sells the Book of the Guilty, which is overseen by Velka, goddess of sin, and then he also sells indictment slips, which are like rights of Velka to then write names into the Book of the Guilty that are then hunted down by the Dark Moon Blades. Well, who's going on that Book of the Guilty? And what's pretty cool is that Book of the Guilty is people who attack the chosen undead. To defile against the gods of old is to prevent the chosen undead from being able to reach their goal, it would appear, because we're allowed to have the indictment slip and cast these people. So is Velka pulling the wool over Gwendolin's eyes? Well, here's where it gets interesting. Now, we do not see a lot of, like, Gwyn's family life, you know? He kind of keeps work and family separate. It's fair, but we know that he has a firstborn son, and we know that Gwyndolin is his lastborn. We know that Seath the Scaleless was bequeathed something, and a lot of people suspect it's the hand of Gwenevere. Why would it be the hand of Gwenevere if Gwenevere abandons Anor Londo and goes and marries the flame god Flann? Why would that be the case? But then the flame god Flann isn't even a real thing, because I looked it up. Apparently in Dark Souls 3, she comes back and is married to like the King Osiris, which is like, what is... She's just popping out kids. Well, there's that fertility and bounty she's always been known for, according to the divine blessing or whatever. Anyway, that being said, the Black Eye Orb allows us to invade Knight Lautrec, who gives us a souvenir of reprisal, which is an item used in the Dark Moon Blades, who have an item called the Blue Eye Orb, which is how they invade the guilty. And one of the sins of that can be cast that causes people to get summoned is killing Gwenevere, or the illusion of Gwenevere, over Anor Londo. Now that's pretty strange, right? Well, let's look at how the last remaining deity in Anor Londo treats their like follower, and that would be the Dark Moon Nidus. And the Dark Moon Nidus, she wears brass armor to hide her hideous form. That's not very nice. Well, also, when you consider if she has a hideous form, Gwyndolin at birth was well aware of his frailty and like immaturity or whatever, you know, his like weakness. And his affinity for moon magic is what caused him to be raised as a woman. But that affinity for moon magic would have been real good for Seath the Scaleless, who's doing crystal work. And then Seath the Scaleless has the Serpent Men. The Serpent Men have the failed writhing experiments, which are known as the Pisaka. Now, what's weird about Pisaka, and I'm not gonna do this with a whole lot of names, but Pisaka is pretty much most of the letters of Priscilla. Like, you can tell that Seath the Scaleless is the father of Priscilla. He is not the father of Gwyndolin, but Gwendolin's mother, Velka, is the mother of Priscilla. Now, the reason I say this is Velka is known for her cult, and then the Life Hunt Scythe has the power to, like, it strikes fear in the heart of the gods. It's that mighty of a power. And there's occult damage associated with it. So in this painted world, you then also have Velka, the occult. That's where that comes from. And then Seath the Scaleless, I mean, she's a pale dragon. The fucking... how much more do you need to get into it? But then, get into this. She's written in the item description as a bastard, whereas Gwyndolin is referred to as a legitimate child. And I think that's because that blood of the Erathilian, or whatever that makes them like big godly people, that was Velka who contributed it and caused it. So the bastard child is a byproduct of an unfaithful wedding or marriage between Gwyn and Velka, and then that's what causes all of Velka's stuff to be hidden in the painted world of Ariamis. Now, when you think about that all happening at the early age of fire, Gwyndolin is being raised by Seath Iscalus in the Duke's archive, so it's not until the gods leave that Gwyndolin returns to Anor Londo, the Forsaken City, and what's he find? Oh, everyone's gone, gee whiz, you know, and I didn't even get to know my papa. And on top of that, there's a statue of his father, and then you got Gwenevere. Firstborn son's not there, and it's like, oh, jeez. You know, like, not even a space for Gwyndolin, you know? Like, it's, didn't even set a place for dinner, you know? Gwyndolin was not seen as a member of his family, but there is a statue that's in the painted world of Ariamis that's quite interesting, rumored to be a statue of Velka that's also found in the New Londo ruins. The New Londo ruins have a statue of a mother and a child, the child being likely a daughter. And again, there was theories that it's Priscilla, but it's not Priscilla, it's Gwyndolin. Because after the experimentations of Seath on the frail, sickly Gwyndolin, and seeing the mutations that occurred as a result, the snakes come out, Velka forsook the throne and said, I've had it, I'm out of here. And she went down to New Londo, and then she was doing really good down there. You see how they built a statue to her and stuff? That's because they like her. Now, by this point, the four kings already would have received Gwyn's, like, Lord Soul, but Velka goes down to New Londo, and all of a sudden, the primordial serpents show up and say, hey, nice bequeathed Lord Soul Shard. How'd you like some life drain? Well, that's an awfully similar skill to something else we've seen, isn't it? What about that Life Hunt Scythe? Well, Life Hunt Scythe will cause bleed buildup on the player, whereas Life Drain will sustain an undead's humanity without kindling. So without a bonfire, you're able to, you know? Anyway, that being said, down in New Londo, you get the Red Eye Orb. Now, we have a red and a blue eye orb. Where else do we see red and blue? Well, what about the red Tearstone Ring and the blue Tearstone Ring? The red Tearstone Ring being an item from Carim, and the blue Tearstone Ring being an item from Katarina. The blue Tearstone Ring is known for its defense, which, you know, that's pretty dope. Red Tearstone Ring, they both sense imminent death. It buffs attack. You got the red and blue there, but where's the Way of White, and where are the members of the occult? When you look at the effigy shield in the Tomb of the Giants, I remember when I said don't ask about the crow? Okay, well, this doesn't actually have to do with them, but this has to do with that wall I was trying to break down to see Vamos. Because if you look at Vamos' helmet, it looks like the same design as what's on the effigy shield. And then you look at the spell Tranquil Walk of Peace, and you realize maybe Velka isn't all that bad if the followers of the occult are out here, you know? And then they have the Dark Moon Seance Ring, which is an item. Now, get this. Havel the Rock, bishop in the Way of White, locked up in a tower. Oh, you know, he was a legendary knight, but went hollow. No boss fog, nothing. Just hanging out in the bottom of a tower. Havel never went hollow. He was framed as hollow because there's fear of the undead among the lords. And so he's able to then get Havel locked into this basement. And why does he want him locked in the basement? So he can take the white seance ring and make a ripoff of it for the Dark Moon seance ring. Now, that's another thing. Oh, Gwyndolin has to be Gwyn's son because the Dark Sun, okay, the guy's like Solaire, you know? If Solaire's not Gwyn's son for liking looking at the sun and stuff, like, same here, you know, watch the Corneas. But like, if that doesn't make Solaire Gwyn's son, then Gwyndolin being born with the power of moonlight and then calling himself the Dark Sun, you're not fooling me, bud. You know, you wield moon magic. I'm pretty much see through those tattered robes, you know? That being said, the Way of White is sending maidens down to the catacombs to barter with Nito. Now, off screen, we saw Paladin Leroy. We didn't actually see it. But his shield, Sanctus, actually has like the blessing of a white flame. Now that's interesting because then you also get the crest shield, which is a blue blessed shield. And then you get the blood shield, which interestingly stored in the Painted World of Ariamis, but the resistance properties of the blood shield mirror those of the sealer. The mask of the sealer as well talks about how it's for atonement of the atrocity of drowning the city of New Londo in order to keep the dark wraiths in, and how, oh, well, it's a necessary thing we gotta do. I think that the sealers were sent by Gwyndolin. And the reason I say this is, now Gwyndolin escapes the Duke's archives with his mother, goes down to New Londo. The four kings are given something for their foresight, and very likely Velka passed away falling to the abyss. That's my supposition, and here's why. The Witch Beatrice. Now, the Witch Beatrice's catalyst is versed in arts both old and new. She wears purple robes, which are kind of interesting because you got the red robes of the sealers, you got the black robes of the pardoners, and then you got the blue robes of Seath's channelers. The red robes are Gwyndolin sorcerers. You know, everyone's got sorcerers, those are Gwyndolins. And the reason I say that those are Gwyndolin sorcerers is because that crimson red, not really the tell. The mask of the sealer, though, talks about having to atone for, like, this atrocity, whereas the mask of Velka sort of, like, imbibes reflection upon, like, the people who are confessing their sins. If you consider that these two factions work hand in hand with one another, there's no way Darkstalker Kaith sent, like, the sealers up from down in the abyss. You know, that's just a load of hoopla. Because the people who fear the dark are Lord Gwyn, and that's why he bequeathed his Lord Soul to the four kings when they founded New Londo, you know? Anyway, for the Witch Beatrice, the reason I say she's probably Velka is because we see her at the Moonlight Butterfly fight, and then we see her at the Four Kings fight. But then on her armor, it says she traversed the abyss but did not make it. Now here's a question. Ingward, up on top of the church, is talking about how Artorias annihilated the Dark Wraiths back in the day. How? How did, when we encounter him, he's got to be like 10 seconds out after he made his covenant with the Abyss monsters, and he's already gone, like, hollow. Like, he did not last long. The guy's, like, in the Ulusil place. Like, it's like that morning he made the covenant of Artorias, and that evening, like, he got corrupted. You know, and there's not really a good timeline of what occurred in the past, except that the player sort of had to bury all of that legend and be the bearer of the responsibility of correcting everything without actually, like, taking credit for it. Okay. Now that that's all sorted. The reason I bring up Beatrice is because those differing, like, things from Vinheim, she still casts Homing Soul Mass. And Homing Soul Mass is a spell developed by the Big Hat himself, you know, legendary sorcerer, and it peers into the creator's sort of, like, intent. Now, he shoots out 5 orbs, and then they go and home in on the people. What's interesting is there's another item called the Pursuers, which is a reflection of like humanity, and be it by envy or by love, these things will relentlessly pursue their targets until they meet them. And you see that one encapsulates what happens when you bend the humanity power and create like magic out of it. And then one happens when you bend the soul arts. Now, Big Hat Logan bends one form of the soul arts. I believe that the Witch Beatrice is designed and modeled after Yulva the Witch from Demon Souls, which is a bit of a leap. But based on design features alone, the idea of like Sageprake and Yulva, Sageprake is someone who is very capable of taking like the spells and then turning them into like utility spells, whereas Yulva the Witch takes the spell and like sort of vibes it out in like, it's hard to explain because that's kind of how it is she's like, oh yeah, just kind of like, you know, based on the emotion of the monster, so it's not really so much me as it is like what I'm given, whereas with Sageprake, it's what he's given. He has the capability to turn into what his vision is. And Big Hat Logan, when you see him the first time, has been captured in Sen's Fortress. And he doesn't stop there. He goes to the Duke's archives and he gets captured, and he doesn't stop there. He tells you Seath the Scaleless has a primordial crystal that's keeping him like safe. Okay, well, I wonder where all that crystal shit's coming from, you know? Like, obviously, the guy... Honestly, with what the Bed of Chaos did with her Lord Soul, I'm starting to think Seath might have been doing some weird stuff with his Lord Soul and that primordial crystal. But I'm not going to get into that too much because I just kind of want to wrap up, because our next episode I want to talk about Seath. But we see Big Hat Logan follows in pursuit of Seath. That being said, following in pursuit of Seath takes him nearer the Dark Moon, which would be Gwyndolin. And then when you consider where Beatrice is going, Beatrice fights the Moonlight Butterfly. After the Moonlight Butterfly is the Divine Ember. Why is a creature Seath the Scaleless built defending an Ember? Huh. Well, Seath the Scaleless probably didn't like people in the Way of White, you know? Especially with Havel being the sworn antagonist of Seath the Scaleless and also developing Great Magic Barrier and Magic Barrier. And then Seath locks him in the basement for his own good, of course, because that's the doublespeak. That's the traitor. Seath the Scaleless is Havel the Rock's friend. Velka is Gwyn's ex-wife. Those are my two big revelations. We're going to talk more about Seath the Scaleless in the next episode, but I wanted to get into some of this because it's been a while since I've gotten to talk about the lore of Dark Souls, and I know I kind of spit out a lot of items left and right, but these things all weave together to create like the world we live in. When not Anastasia is killed, but when Rhea of Thorland is killed by Petrus, you don't get a black eye orb, you get a pendant from Rhea, but you can take that pendant from Rhea, a member of the Way of White, and trade it with Snuggly the Crow, an entity representative of Velka, and get a souvenir of reprisal to turn in at the Dark Moon Gwyndolin. So it's strange how these deities align. Velka appears to be ever present and yet at the same time completely absent, and that's what makes me suspect she's like an ex-wife type figure to Gwyn. The moon magic, I mean, you got the moonlight robes. The banishment catalyst of the Sealers is made of tin. Gwyndolin has the tin Dark Moon catalyst, and Seath, when Logan gets up, and we'll get to it, but he finds the tin crystallization catalyst to do those spells. So that's kind of where that lineage comes from. But that was probably a lot. I hope it wasn't too confusing and that it kind of made sense, even though I'm I'm not gonna edit any of this. There's a lot going on, okay? But the idea is, you got statues, obviously, of a missing god in Anor Londo that we know is the firstborn son. And then you got 2 statues and then deities that aren't even mentioned in the family records and stuff. And it's like, wow, if he did that to his firstborn son, wonder what he'd do to his other family members, you know? Gwyn is not a good guy. I'm starting to realize that. He may have linked the first flame, but the path of dark may be the just path, ultimately. For we see the sin of his insatiable greed, his never-ending lust for the age of fire, and it's brought us about to this twilight, where the flow of time is convoluted. It ebbs and flows upon the shores of yesterday, tomorrow. So, anyway, thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And, oh, the bite rings. The reason I brought those up is because you got poison bite, and you got the blood bite, and then you got the curse bite. And that's black, blue, and red. So that's, you know, colors. The Ring of the Evil Eye is actually a beast that assaulted Astora, and believe it or not, there's the Earl Arstor of Carim. So Earl Arstor of Carim, who made the bite rings, also defeated the beast that assaulted Astora and turned its eye into a ring that we get in the depths. And then on top of that, there's a city called Astora. I wonder, you know? But, I mean, that's all. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.